Hello, I am Abra Gilman, and I am the Customer Success Manager for Collins Computing, and you are in my presentation today. So let's get started and show you what we're going to cover. We're talking about GP upgrades today. So I'm going to be showing the latest features in the newest revision of Microsoft Dynamics, which is GP 18.4 Plus. And I work for Collins Computing, and yet I am so honored that you guys voted me in to show you these features. So I tell you a little bit about myself. I've been in this channel since 1994, and that's just doing GP, just promoting it, implementing it, training it, supporting, and then our company develops against it. And the reason that I feel like I can show you what's new is not only do I look for what's new in every latest release and show my customers, but I'm also really good friends with Terry Healy from Microsoft. So she sends out, her pre-release to all of the vendors. But then I also work with her in testing out her little documents of what's new in each release. So I really get involved in what's new in every single release, and that's why I love to show it to our customers and even customers that aren't ours, like you guys, just coming together during these conferences. So again, thanks for voting in my session, and let's get started. So first, we're going to talk about, GP. When you start up GP now, it doesn't flash across the screen what the version is. Just like Excel or Word doesn't come up and say, hey, I'm Microsoft Excel 2000, whatever. So just like those products, GP now just has the version sitting in the background. And the code version is 18 point something point XXX. So now we're on 18.4. So back in 2018 was released. Then in 2019, we had we had an R2, and then we had a 0.2. 2020, we had 0.3, and in 2021, we had a 0.4. So that's kind of where we're at. And also, Microsoft came out with what they're calling the modern life cycle. And that means that instead of each release number, as you see at the top here, being supported for 5 years and then kind of transitioning out into the next release, the modern life cycle is going to be just a continuum. So each year, Microsoft is going to release their, starting at kind of their tax updates in the beginning of the year. They're going to do a halfway point. Usually the Canadian taxes and such get released in about June. They do a feature release in October, and then a year-end release, usually around mid-November. So as long as a customer is keeping up with that cycle, their software is supported. So it's kind of a continual modern life cycle release. It's not that something's going to go away. It's just continuing to be updated. And right now, Microsoft has said that they are going to keep enhancing GP until at least 2028. So there's kind of a comment out in the GP world that everyone's like 2028 and beyond. And that comes from this new modern life cycle saying that it's at least out to 2028. But, we're only at the beginning of 2022, and that's still 6 years out. So I wouldn't be surprised if halfway through this year, maybe they extend that to 2029. We don't know. But if you want to know more about that, in this slide, I've given the link out so that you can understand everything about this life cycle policy and, what it means and how to keep up with the latest versions. So a little bit about on that before we talk about what's new. Also, when we talk about what's new, I understand that a lot of users are not coming from, version 18.3. They're coming from version 2016 or 2015. So a friend of mine, David Laster, and I got together, and we have this spreadsheet, and I'll show it to you in real form here. And this spreadsheet goes all the way back to 2015. And what we've done is we've listed every major enhancement that's come into the product, what module that is, really referencing, a little bit of a short description, and then even a link out to the Microsoft documentation for that feature. So you can really look at all the features at a glance. You can sort by the modules. You can determine which ones would affect you as you upgrade. And so I just was talking to a client of mine that was coming from 2018, the RTM, the release to manufacturing, that version that was back in 2018. So they knew most of these features, but then all of these features that start with 2018 R2 and point 2 and point 3 and point 4, we've got over 100 new features that were released. So when somebody says, I'm going to upgrade and I'm only coming from 18, well, that's 100 new features that you have the option of getting to know. So we put this spreadsheet out there. People can ask me for it. As I mentioned that, as I'm presenting today, there's a chat. Go ahead and put some questions out there in the chat because this is a recorded session. So I'll be able to answer your questions as we go. I'll be able to maybe put up a link to this spreadsheet. I'll answer anything you want. So as we go ahead and ask me questions. I can't answer them now because you're not with me, but I'll answer them then. And then at the end of my presentation, I'll have time to answer questions also. So when we talk about, hey, this is Microsoft Dynamics GP 28 or 18.4, what are the features in this release? These are the new features that are listed. And as I mentioned, going back to 18, there's 20 features in each of the releases at least. But this is not all that you get. When you get a release, you're also going to get fixes or, things that make the system better. That's not really a feature. It's just a tweak in the code. So if I look at what else was released just in this 18.4 release, I underlined a few of these things like, the vendor ID with an apostrophe throws a syntax error. That's been in the system forever because I've told people don't use quotes in your IDs. But now they've kind of gone back and fixed it so that if people do use it, it's not going to be an issue and they can continue. So all these other things that are listed are just enhancements, but we wouldn't call them features. We call them like fixes or changes to the system. So that was just in 18.4, but then there's been a year end and a hot fix since then. So now we're talking about all these other little features that are not actually things that we would consider a feature because it's a fix or a change that just allows the system to be more compliant. Okay, so now let's actually show features. One of my favorite features that came about way back in 2018 was the ability to go into many screens like the accounts payable vendor inquiry and even in the receivables customer inquiry and do some more sorting. So if I pulled up records, I could say, I not only just want to see all my documents and document number order, but I want them descending. So I would get the highest document number first, usually my most recent document, and then go to my older ones, or even by a date range and say I want the newest documents at the top. Because if you can imagine, some of my clients have been using the system since 1994. So they've got millions, not exaggerating, millions of transactions in the system. And so they'd open up these screens and it would take a very long time for them to scroll to the bottom. Or they'd always have to put a date range in to say, I only want to see these documents, right? Now I know that they can run things like the company data archiver that we do suggest people run to take some of those millions of transactions and put them into another database. But if they didn't, or even if they did, they want the system to be faster. They want to see the newest things on top. So it was a great feature. But the thing is, I'd always have to select it. Even though I knew when I went into these screens as a user, I always wanted them to appear that way. So if you had been to any sessions with my friend Amber Bell and we would show you things like using a macro, that when you put that macro in a shortcut on your homepage, you can open up these screens and it would save those features. So if you're on an older version, you can still do that. But now this new feature that was presented in 18.4 says, let's save my preferences. So instead of using macros, there's a Save Preferences, which I'll show you, and it's in 7 different windows. So we've got 2 in the receivables area, the transaction by customer and document. We've got a couple in the payables area for vendors and documents. We've got the 2 inquiries under checkbook register and the balance inquiry, and then 1 under the SOP item inquiry screen. So I'm going to show you those, and I'll pop into GP in just a second. But just so that you had them on slides, I wanted to show you that when you go into these screens, you pull up like my vendor inquiry screen, and I make all my choices, and then I come up under view and I say save my window preferences. So it's saving it for me as a user in this company, how I want to look at it, right? So on my payables side, I might have that I want, by document date descending. And then here on my other side, on my customer side, I like it to sort by amount remaining descending, so I can have my biggest owing transactions at the top. So to save in these screens, I just go under View and Save Window Preferences. Then, as I mentioned, under Checkbook Register, you've got those same ideas that you can sort any way you want, and then you can save the window preferences, right? So both for the check register and the checkbook balance. And then this is the one that's under the sales order processing item inquiry. So in this screen, there's lots of choices. You get to choose how you're going to filter. So by items, by like an item range or document range, you can choose whether you want to include different document types. And so that's going to be saved. Whether you usually want to display for unposted or history, and then how you want it sorted. And then like this that I was talking about in the other screens, that I want like item number descending or document date descending. So you have all those choices. So let's go take a look at how it actually works in GP. So if I go out to sales, which I'm already at, and I go to transaction by customer, and you see that when I pull up a customer, I don't have to come in here and then unclick history. And when I did bring up a customer or a vendor, it would have waited and had to bring up all that history before I even unclicked history, right? So usually I'll tell people come in this screen before you select a customer or a vendor, make your choices, like unclick history and then do it. But now I don't have to, because under View and Save Window Preferences, I've already saved the fact that I want to not include history, and I want to use, my document date descending. So if I open this up, you would see that at the top, this is my demo database, but I've got, documents with dates that are closer to the future. If I go then into purchasing, and I do the same type of inquiry by vendor, and I pull up a vendor, you'll see that again, I've chosen not to show history right now, but I want unapplied amount descending. So if I show this, it's saying, what's my unapplied amount, right? So it's $2,100. And these are all open, which means that they're owing. But if I decided to add history and then redisplay, I'm still going to get the items that I owe for first the most. And then you'll see as I scroll down that even though these documents, the original amounts were big, I owe 0. So it's showing below the other ones because I was showing the unapplied amount. Now, if I wanted to sort by something like original amount, then I would get these documents for $2,000 that are appearing towards the top, right? So it's sorting that descending. But anyway, how I changed this, so let's say now I wanted it to save it with history. Again, I just do View, Save Window Preferences, and the next time that I open up this window, it's going to show me that I've got original amount descending, so it's sorting by original amount. So it's that easy. And then again, I mentioned that we have the same thing under the checkbook register and the checkbook balance. So whatever screen I'm in, whatever checkbook I'm in, it's going to pull up whatever I've chosen as my descending or ascending sorting. right? And all I did was go under View and Save. And then the last one was, again, back to Sales. And then if I do by Sales Items, and this is where I said I have lots of different choices. So right when I come into the screen, it said she likes unposted, document number descending, so that my newest documents are on the top. And then once I pick either a date range or I hit redisplay, then it'll show what I wanted it to show. So I can still open up this screen to show a little bit more, but it's not doing it until I hit redisplay, because you don't want to come into this screen and if you've got, a date range that you want to put in because you've got millions of transactions, it's going to wait for you to put in a date range and then hit redisplay, and then it'll show you what you're looking for. Okay, let's go back. So choose to post by transaction or summary to bank module. What does that mean? So when I'm doing cash receipts, and let's say that I have maybe a bunch of wire transfers that are coming through, and sometimes I want those to just come all the way through and hit my bank account in a summary mode versus every single transaction that I'm getting from a customer, and maybe I want those to hit the bank in detail mode, or maybe it's vice versa for you. Well, in the past, you could tell the system, I want to post in either summary mode or transaction mode. And you did that in your posting setup. And it was all or nothing, right? You only got to choose one or the other. But now, with the newest version, if you've said, I want to post through, so let's talk about that a little bit. I'm going to go to the next screen. In my company setup, if you go to my company setup screen, hit this options button, then this new company setup options window opens, or not this new window, it's been there, this window. And if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you see an option that says automatically post cash receipt deposits. If you click that, then what happens is your cash receipts, when you're doing sales, receivables, cash receipts, when you post it, it actually posts a deposit in the bank transaction module. You don't have to go into bank transaction module, take your deposit, group it all together and then post it. It'll do that automatically. So if you've got that chosen now and you're on the new version, when you're creating this batch of cash receipts, there's going to be another field right here. So if I didn't have it selected, it looks like this. If I do have it selected, then I have posting date, and then I have this extra question. Do you want to post it in summary or transaction? So if you're going in there and you're not seeing it, go back to your setup, right? So let me go back. Now, when you choose, here's my batch, I'm going to post in summary or by transaction. So when I hit the post button, it not only posts in my receivables module, but then it goes ahead and it posts in my bank transaction module, either as a complete batch, all of my cash receipts in one, or as individual transactions. All-in-one preferences saved. What is this? Well, if you've never seen this screen, I'll start by showing it to you. It's basically, you can be in accounts receivable, accounts payable, or even in inventory. And if you pull up a master record, so a customer or a vendor or an item number, you can then look at all of the transactions that have to do with that master record. And this is a great feature, except that it always defaulted to just open transactions. And so what would happen is initially they thought, oh, you want to see if an invoice is open. And that's great. And if you click on the invoice, it'll show all the documents that are associated with that invoice, like the payments, the receipts, any purchase orders if it was in the payables module, or any orders if it was in the sales module. So it shows both ways. But it wouldn't show it if you didn't select to choose history, not just open documents. And so you'd have to go and hit these little filters to tell the system every time I want to show or not show history or open. Didn't make sense. So now what it's going to do, I'm going to show you, is that let's say I am in sales and I'm just looking at transaction by customer. We already had this screen open, right? Because we were looking at how to sort. But what you might not notice is that there's this little button called All-in-One Viewer. Now I'm going to move this over and show you that in this sales inquiry area, there's also a sales all-in-one. So you could go straight to this screen if you wanted. But in most cases, people are looking at a customer, they're looking at some sort of document, and then they want to see more about that document and what's related to that document. So what it's happened right now is I've come out here and it's saying, here's your payment. And by the way, that payment paid this invoice and paid this order. And what's great is that because I've already looked at this customer before and I've changed my options, those filters to say like show open and maybe also historical documents, it knows how I like to save it, right? So I didn't have to change anything because I've already gone through this ridiculous nightmare to do this before. So I don't have to say like file, save, or anything like that. It just remembers, but it remembers by customer or vendor ID. So it is a little clunky, in my opinion, that you still have to choose what it is that you want to show for this particular record, but it's out there, right? And it's great that I can see, right away, this payment. I could zoom down and then I could hit apply. And then I could see, oh, that's this invoice number. And then if I go to this invoice number and I say, I wonder what document that came from, I could see the order. So I'd have to drill down 4 times to see the same information that I can see right here at this top level: cash receipt, invoice, order. But the modification or the enhancement in 18.4 is that it saves how I want to look at these. Like, do I want to show my, saved credits, fully applied credits, all these things, and it's going to save it so that if I come in here and say, look at this payment, oh, maybe it also has to do with a return, that they returned something. So that's the feature. So let's go back. And now you see all of what's out there. I love getting information quickly. And so all of these features that I've kind of been showing you is how can I get to the data that I want to look for quicker. So here, the new feature is that if I'm in my inquiry screens in sales order processing, I can actually go and zoom down to, just my document record, which I could always do, because I could pick one of these lines and I could zoom over the field in the blue, document number. But now with this one, we have a go-to. And if the document is open, I can go to my entry screen and I can then modify it from there. Before, I could find my document, but then I had to go through sales transaction entry, enter in my document number, and then go to do it. Right? You could create smart lists so that you could do this quicker, but you couldn't do it from the inquiry screens. So what I want to show you is if we go into GP and we go into like my sales document area, and the first thing is that you're saying, oh, am I looking at unposted or history, right? So if I do history, and usually you'd put a range if you have a lot of documents out there, but if I clicked on one, I said before, you could always just zoom down here and it would show you the inquiry zoom. But now at the top, you could say go to. Well, because it's historical, I can only go to my inquiry screen. And it knows, here's my inquiry screen, but it's not showing me the option to go to entry. So to get to the entry screen, I do have to be in an unposted document. But then you can see that I have both options. So I can go to sales transaction entry, and now I'm right in here and I can modify that document if I've got access, right? If I've got security. So it's a great feature. Again, just gets you to where you want to be a little faster. So in sales document range inquiry, if you've never used this, it's a great feature again, that you have a choice. You can set up when I come into this screen, I'm going to choose one of these things, and maybe it's an item number. When I select this inquiry option, this range option, because I've set this up a certain way, it's going to ask me more questions. Like, what item numbers are you looking for? And maybe I'm looking for, a range of all my ACCS. I just messed that up. So my ACCS through my ADS, let's say. And then it's going to ask me more questions, like, do you only want to see a certain type of document? So maybe certain types of quotes or invoices. Or if I just hit OK, it's everything, right? Document numbers, I don't know the range. I want them all. Customer IDs, I want them all. Salespeople, I want them all. Now, it's only asking me these questions because I've set them up that way in the range. So I'll show you that in a moment. But here, once I get to the document, now I've got those go-to. So I can find, I was looking who has this item on their invoices. Oh, I found it. I need to go modify that invoice. It was the wrong one, or we realized we need to put something else in, right? So that was the feature. But in case you've never used this range, I'm going to zoom down to it. So when I create these item ranges or these query ranges, I can choose any of these ranges, and I can either predefine what I want it to be, or if I just take a range, like let's say I had, I don't know, commitment status, and hit insert. Then it's going to say I need to prompt during my inquiry. Okay, prompt during inquiry. But if I put in something like customer name, and I actually put a name in, or I wanted only customers that started with A through B, so all the A's, then it would have put in exactly what I put in as my option. It wouldn't have asked me at the time of my inquiry. So you kind of get, I'm not going to save that because I already have it saved. But so some of those, as I just showed you, it asked me a lot of questions. But with the orders one, as soon as I hit redisplay, depending on, I know what it is. I'm going to show you. I'm going to say unposted and history and then redisplay, because in my inquiry that I set up, it was a specific document number range. So those documents were both in history. So because I didn't have history selected, it didn't show me it when it was just unposted. But it's kind of a neat feature, and I know I got off topic, but I had a little time to do that. So the feature was just being able to drill down to either the inquiry screen or the SOP entry. I just showed you a little bit about the sales range inquiry, so I don't need to go into that. There's just a screen to show that once I pick my inquiry ID, I can still zoom down. But the important thing there was just hoping that you know how to use the range inquiry. All right, so swiping right. Little things sometimes make a big difference, right? So if you go to Financial Setup and Segment, so let's just do that. So my financial screen, and I find the setup area, which of course is down here, and segment. And I pull up, I want to look for division, right? And we've got all of these divisions. In the past, if I wanted to look and maybe modify the description for this, maybe this was just corporate or something like that, I could do that and I could save, but then I couldn't go to the next one. I'd literally have to hit this and then find the next one and work my way down. So now they've just added these little arrows to go left and right. And so I can quickly go through all of my segments. So something simple, but we weren't allowed to go swiping. Now on that subject, I just mentioned that I could update my descriptions, right, of my segments or my counts. So in the mass modify area, in the past, my account mass modify would allow me to do some certain things, right? It would allow me to copy a whole range of account numbers into a new department if I wanted. But what now Microsoft has allowed us to do is, let's say I went and I updated a bunch of my descriptions like I just did for corporate. And I realized that as I'm scanning through my accounts, it never had like that segment description in my chart of accounts, but I want it to. So what I can do is I can go through the mass modify and I can say I only want to update the account description between a range of accounts, and then I want it to add. Now, I said proceed with caution because there's a couple of things that you have to consider. If you have segments, so I'm going to go back for a second and I'm going to go to segment again. And if I've got segments and most of my customers for their primary accounts, like I do, they don't have descriptions for segments for their main segment. So I would probably suggest that if you're going to use this function, that you go and either use Integration Manager or the import utility and update these descriptions, right? Because if I run this, it's going to take the descriptions for each of the segments and put them into your description of your account number. So here I've shown, I don't want to do it again because I did it once, but here I've shown that if I ran this account update description feature, which is fantastic if you've got them all in there, but if I didn't, now all that was going to show is administration, where I really want it to show salaries and wages and overtime and bonuses. So you need to make sure that you've got your segment descriptions created, and then you can run this mass modify tool. And it's great about putting all of the descriptions together for your account number. So that was just my warning. I did it, so didn't want you guys to do it. All right. This year and last year, we heard a lot about 1099s. And so with this latest version, 18.3 and 18.4, you're now able to print the 1099 NEC. This year, the government said, oh, let's do 3 per page. So we had to upgrade for that. But some things that Microsoft did, which as they were in there, they thought these would be nice features, is something like this, right? You're in the 1099 print screen. And before, it would always just default to like continuous, like when we all had those dot matrix printers. And so that was just the default because it was the first one. So now it defaults to single feed because everybody knows that most people have laser printers. So it was just a simple little change. When you come into this screen, single feed is going to default so that you don't have to change it every single time, right? It also defaults to 1099 form instead of like alignment form. So some things that you might not have noticed, and it just is easier because you don't have to think about it. And if you haven't been in this window in a while, you would notice that there's a new option, a 4th option of non-employee compensation for those 1099 NEC forms. So that was new as of last year. Now, because of the changes of the 1099 NEC, there were changes to the 1096. And that's in kind of the fixes area. It's not even in the features area. But one of the other things that Microsoft did is when you're printing the 1099s, you also can have email addresses that then could print from the 1096s. So basically, it's just saying, hey, if I have a company set up, right? So in my company setup area, I can put an email address, and that email from my company setup screen over here on the right is going to now default and come in on the 1099 screen. Prior to this, we had to type it in, and then it would pick it up when I'm printing that company 1096 form. So this is just saying, hey, another new feature, makes it a little bit easier. I show all these screens to say, how do I get that field to fill in? Well, I have to go to administration, company, pull up my record, put in the email address, and then it'll come in. And as it prints, you would see that it comes out on the printout. Workflow, everybody's favorite. Now, really, in 2018, right? So way back that many years ago, I'm just checking my time here, workflow really came of age. So prior to the 2018 version, honestly, I didn't tell people that they should implement workflow. Now, I think that they should. So In workflow, there's a lot of new features. They've added things, like besides just purchasing and general ledger, they've added sales, they've added approvals for things like setting up workflow, for setting up vendors, for setting up account numbers, all these things. But what was kind of funky is that if you used batch approval, right? So if in general ledger receivables and payables, you're saying, I want the whole batch to be approved at once. So not transaction by transaction, but the whole batch. But you could approve that batch, put it through approval, and then after they approved it, somebody would still have to come back and post it. Even though you've already put it in a batch, you've submitted it, you've told somebody to approve it. So now there's an option, when they approve it, go ahead and post it. So fantastic feature. It is only applicable if you're posting by or approving by batch. The other thing that is newer in this just 18.4 for workflow is that there's one more option for the approvers count. So if you have workflow, and let's say that at one stage you have the option for 4 different people to approve, but you didn't need all of them to approve, you just wanted 2 of them to approve. So before, there was really no way to say that. You'd say only 1 response is needed, a majority, which would be 3, or all of them must approve. So now I could get that 2 approver out of 4. So that is just a new feature in the little setup screen for approvals. Something that very rarely gets any updates anymore is projects. It's out there, it's functional, and if you use the Professional Services Tools library, you know that you could do things like change vendor IDs and change account numbers and change inventory item IDs, but there really was nothing for project. And in the Professional Services Tools, some of those features were taken out and put into the utilities menus under sales and purchasing and general ledger. So instead of adding more professional services tools, Microsoft has added more items to the utilities area in project. So now we have this project code modifier. And if you go into this screen under project utilities, you would see that you have all of these options that you can now change some of the codes to say, oh, I want, this contract ID to be this. Maybe it was a year and you shouldn't have set it up as years because it's multiple year, or it's a project ID and you need to change the code. So just like in those other modules, project accounting has come into the new ages, and you can go and change what you need. So you just put in the old code, the new code, and run it. And you could also import like a whole list of items to do a whole bunch at a time. So that is what this is showing, that I did a whole bunch of changes. Now, payroll is something that I feel like is very labor intensive. And so here I said, I love defaults, right? Every time I'd come into this screen, I'd have to go into options and I'd have to select a bunch of things. And now it remembers what you selected. Just like when we were in like the all-in-one screens, it remembers for particular types of batches for that user that you like things sorted a certain way, things like that. So it's just in this screen, payroll transaction entry, it's going to remember how you defaulted your options, which is amazing. The other thing that has come into payroll in the past couple releases is that they're masking social security numbers, right? They did it first in payroll, then they did it in HR, but they didn't have the option to mask it on these W-2 forms. So now you just have the option to mask it there too, and just show the last 4. When new features come in, it's because people voted on them. So this feature I actually saw out in, I'll show you the screen in a minute, out in the voting area for new features. And it said that it was approved and like it was planned. And I thought, oh, that means it's in the next release. So I knew this was in the release. So now what I do when a new release is coming is I go out to the area, the connect area where you can vote, and I look for things that say planned because I know that's going in the next release. It was a simple thing. Like when you're doing a Safepay file, actually pull what was printed on the check, not the employee name, but the check name, because that's what was actually sent on the check. So a little feature, but it reminds me that we can see the future sometimes of what's coming. And then this was a huge payroll feature. You have the option to now import into payroll transaction entry. So I give you the exact layout that I tested, and Terry Healy has some out on the Microsoft discussion pages, but it allows you to copy and paste into this screen. And if you have any issues, it'll give you a little validation report so that you can go back to your spreadsheet, fix it, and pull it back in. Or depending on what the errors are, it could have actually imported, and you can change things if you need to. But the easiest way is just to fix what's here in the spreadsheet, copy it again, paste it, and away you go. So thanks for voting for me. I'll go and answer questions that are in the chat. And I just want to show you a couple things I mentioned about voting. So on the experience.dynamics.com, you can put in project suggestions. And this is where I said I went out and I saw what was planned. And so I already knew what was coming. Okay. And then, as I mentioned, when you go to look at these things, you can see how they work by going out to these blogs. But I'm going to go back to this. Thanks for voting with me. And I'm going to go chat with you now. So thanks for having me. Talk to you guys soon. Hi, guys. Hey, Sean.
Hey, Abra. Great session. Very well done.
Thank you. I had so many comments going on. I'm like, is anybody paying attention?
Everyone was paying attention. Everyone was paying attention. A lot of great stuff covered, Abra. I think I saw someone say you are the queen of new features for GP. So,
well, I'd have to say Terry Healy is, because then, I call her when I know something's coming, and I'm like, okay, I tried this. It didn't work for me. So she's the one that I actually have to go to say, okay, this is not working. How does it really work? I know you sent this document. So now she always sends me her what's new documentation before she posts it. So I'm pretty excited when that happens. I'm like, ooh, let me go test. But
that's awesome. It's awesome. It's really cool for the community, for folks like you to give their time and put the work in to test these things out to make sure they're nice and polished for the end user. So a couple things I'll note: everyone wanted the spreadsheet. You delivered. So everyone, the link is there.
I still have to thank David Laster. It was actually his idea, his brainchild. He's like, look, I started putting this thing together back in 2015. What do you think? We were doing a what's new in 2018 or 16 or something. And he's like, what do you think? Should we put this out there? And I know Kim Peterson way back in the day. I don't mean for her to sound so old, but she had something like that out somewhere. So there is something from way, way back. So I jumped on with David, and we have now kept it up. But he sent me a link about 2 days ago, and I've been so busy I haven't even looked at it. But he took this spreadsheet and he actually put it into a Power BI thing so that you could click on financial and then it'll show you all the financial things. So I asked him maybe if he could share with the community. He just said, I'll send you the PBI file to post for folks to use if you want. As you know, it is a work in process, though. Thanks for the great presentation. So there you go. But yeah, I mean, it was his brainchild, so I never want to take credit for that. But now it's a monster, and I just keep updating it. And I'm like, should I put things that are fixes and not enhancements? So there are a few in there that were kind of fixes, but really we're trying to keep with what's new, what's different, not, was the social security number thing masked? That doesn't seem like a super cool feature that I need to put in there anymore.
Well, it's very helpful. So thanks to David for that as well. Anything in Power BI is fun. It looks like David was tasked a few things through the chat. He's got some leave it to the GPub community to to start asking and for the folks to start delivering. So that's pretty cool. There was a request, it looks like, that maybe we could ask Terry to put Abra Bitmojis in GP in future releases. That might be okay.
Oh my gosh. No, I did write down a couple things too. Like first, David, did you count how many Bitmojis? He said he was going to in the beginning. Let's see if he did. But, and then Amber put a ton of links all the way through. In my presentation, I always put the links, but I don't know that you can actually download the presentation. So Amber tried to put all the links that I had in my presentation there. So if you wanted to go out and see, like, how do I go vote, right? That was the experience. What is it? Experience.dynamics.com, that you can go vote for new features, and then you can actually see. I'm afraid that Terry Healy's not going to put like approved or planned anymore, because we're all going to start going out there and going like, ooh, what's in there?
Well, we can see the future, right? We can see it's getting traction, and it's very helpful. So check that out. So thanks to Amber for all the help with the links and a few questions. So Abra, one question that was out there is where can, okay, so that we know where we can find it all, but do the modern cycle upgrades take less time / planning than your typical upgrades from the past?
Yeah, I know everybody's going to have their own opinions, because it really depends on what came out in that release. But for the most part, if you go back to version 6 or version 8, like when security was completely redone, there's not going to be that complete rewrite and complete restructuring of tables. I would even say, like, because of the workflow in 2018, that there were a ton of table changes. So in these newer releases, there are not those overall reconstruction of how tables are linked or the tables themselves. Like maybe there's a field on the end of it. So absolutely, the upgrades are not the way that they used to be. I wouldn't say they're a one button upgrade like people used to try to say. The other thing is that the third-party vendors that are really the ones that latch on to most of the screens, they understand what's coming. They've been tested, and they have really easy upgrade paths. Again, if you go back to version like 2013 or 2015, when smart lists were completely rewritten, and so smart list builder was rewritten, we're not having those things anymore. So in my opinion, at least, the upgrades, although I still recommend doing a test upgrade, they don't take as much reconfiguration. You're not losing all your reporting, but I always still, even if you modify reports and forms, reports in Windows, I say try to go back to the original, because a lot of times they're going to add a lot of new fields to those reports, and you can probably do your modifications again, except for things like, your sales order documents and invoices. Don't redo those. I don't want to redo those for you.
Very good. So we've come a long way, right? We've come a long way in that process, and I'll just kind of put a bullet point or an exclamation point next to what was said in the chat there by Zubin. So the idea site is there for new features and suggestions. So GP is alive and well. Be sure to participate in those activities. Abra, we've got like just 1 minute left.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, so great job. Thank you for your contribution. Any closing words for our folks here at DynamicsCon?
Yeah, just if you're running GP, I would say just keep going on it. There are new features coming out. There's always ability to link to other things using apps and add-ons. You don't have to leave your foundational product. And then, as Terry Healy would say, like 2028 and beyond. So hopefully we'll just see a whole new set of features next year, and I'll be back to show you those then.
Very good.
Thanks, guys.